But thanks everybody so much for joining us this morning. I'm sure things are intense in your lives, and I don't know about you, but I feel like, especially in the midst of the social distancing, being able to see our colleagues on Zoom or do some FaceTime with family has definitely boosted my spirits and kept me focused on what we need to be working on. Being here with you all, I mean, you all are our community. And when Chloe wrote us last week to ask, hey, what are others doing in the PBB world when it comes to continuity of operations plans, the first thought was, wow, if you wouldn't mind sharing that with everybody, this sure would be a special occasion. So thank you again for joining us today. Our agenda looks something like this. I'm going to wrap up my comments here really quickly, and we'll get on to allowing Chloe to share what she's been working on in the city of Boise, Idaho. That's a nice long 15 to 30 minute window of time for Chloe so that she can have the opportunity to really explain what they've been doing. We'll have some time for you all to ask some questions of Chloe in terms of what she's been doing. And then we have some time carved out towards the end to have more of a total open forum on general questions that you might have or advice from the people who are on this call. What we would ask, and I'll remind everybody of this at the end, it's tough to have order in a Zoom meeting, but if we could do a raised hand in the participants functionality in Zoom, if you see how to click on participants and raise your hand, or ask your question within the chat. In other words, anything but jumping into the live phone call would be great, and we'll try to monitor and call on people to announce that you're up for talking, and that'll be our best way to keep order with over 30 people joining the call. So just a couple other quick notes. We have launched, opened up a web page on our home website to announce some of the opportunities that we're trying to provide, the resources that we're hoping to share, just like today's presentation. Liz is recording today's session, and we will post it to our webpage to make sure that you can download it and have access to everything that you hear today, especially if others wanted to join and they weren't able to make it. Obviously, we're kicking off today with Chloe. Thank you very much. We'll get to you here in just 1 second. If you haven't heard from Eric Keck, he has been sending out a number of emails yesterday and today, and the spirit of his message is we've decided to open up 3 months of free access to the fiscal health scenario planning tool. For those of you who are trying to monitor closely day by day what the impacts are to things like your sales tax revenue or your tourism tax and so on, and what the expense side looks like. It's a very good tool that we used in the midst of the Great Recession for ourselves in Jefferson County, and it's a great way to start to model what if scenarios. So if you haven't heard from Eric Keck, please reach out to him. If you have and you're interested, we're aiming to kick off our first cohort of users of fiscal health by next week, and we'll have 1 week runs at this for the foreseeable future. And just a couple other things coming up. Next week, as I just mentioned, we'll start with our fiscal health cohort 1. The following week, we're just starting to talk with David Sewell McCann about storytelling and narratives around programs in a time like this. And then looking out towards, I believe it's the week of April 6th, we're working on a webinar opportunity with Shane Kavanaugh and GFOA. GFOA is also providing a host of resources. If you have not seen those already, please go to GFOA's homepage, but we will be doing a webinar together with GFOA to talk about ways to use fiscal health as well as general resource planning. So without further ado, Chloe, are you ready to take control of the screen? Let's see if we can help.
I am.
Chloe, thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to turn it over to you, and let us know if you need a hand.
Okay, thanks. I am just wanting to confirm that everyone can see my my screen.
Yes, it looks
Okay.
great.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for introducing me, Chris, and for giving me the opportunity to share some of our learnings. This is by no means the only way to do it, or even maybe the best way to do it, but we sort of slapped together an approach that I think is working for the immediate term. But I was definitely, when I had originally reached out to Chris, interested in knowing what other people were doing. You know, it was basically last Thursday, I think, when everybody got together and said, okay, we need to put together something that is going to be a quick response to preparing for whatever is to come. I think that we still are not quite sure what that will look like, but it felt like the first thing we needed to do was map the essential services and essentially put together what our action plans mean or would look like based on what sort of phasing we were in. So what we decided is that everybody needed to create an action plan, which would be based on what we identified as these 3 phases of the virus. So the first phase, no confirmed cases, or a very limited number of cases, to stage 2, which is up to 25 cases, and the first city employee would have a confirmed case, and then phase 3, which is greater than 25 confirmed cases in the community. And obviously, you know, I think if we were going by just true numbers and testing, we would technically be, as the city of Boise, in stage 1. Though we are working with everyone now to get all departments into a phase 3 situation by tomorrow, just based on the fact that the low numbers of testing and just kind of the lack of information generally that we don't know. So we put this draft example together, and then we shared that out with all of the departments, and we really gave the departments basically like 24 hours to put together what their action plans would look like in terms of planning and prevention in stage 1, 2, and 3, what that looks like for alternate service delivery, what we would be closing, canceling, or delaying, and then what that would mean for staff in terms of how they were working and where they were working. So we had every department submit what their action plans were, and then on Sunday, our team got together and we put all of the action plans together, and we put them into basically like a heat map. And the heat map showed areas of alignment or areas where we were having disalignment. And then we came together as a larger group to look at those areas and negotiate generally or discuss like where we were going to go. So let me show you what our heat map looks like to give you a sense of what I'm actually talking about. Here we go. Here's what it looks like. And I think it'll take a minute for it to adjust the way that it looks. So essentially we broke it up into closures, cancellations, and alternative service delivery, and then what that meant for staffing. You'll see the department is to the left, and then if you're in a stage 2, we put you as, and then what we did is we color coded it based on sort of type of impact to staff. So green would be some closures, maybe limited, limited impact to staff. Yellow would be public facing closures and impact. And then red is basically only essential staff are working in the building or remote if at all possible. So then you can see as you scroll down, in most instances there's alignment. In some instances there wasn't alignment, but in some instances it didn't really matter if there wasn't alignment. But we wanted to make sure that we had a cohesive plan across the city both in terms of communication for our employees and then also communications externally to the city. And what we didn't want to have was one department saying a certain thing to citizens and another department saying something that was contradictory. So we put this action plan together. We have kind of what a final one looks like. And I'm pulling that up right now so that people can have a sense of what that looks like. Here's what our final one was. And as noted, you can see as of Monday, we were in the current stage of the phase 2. But the goal was that by the end of the week, we would be at a staffing level of a phase 3. And I think the general consensus around that was, let's be aggressive in the short term, and then as we come up with specific challenges or things that were unanticipated, we would basically have more time and energy to devote to triaging that, as opposed to trying to get our people, into the stage 3. So once we did that, we knew that we needed to map. So we consolidated our act plans to ensure consistency across the facilities. IT support was a big one. So they are having to support basically every single department, remote and on-site, and then the internal and external communications. Then what we wanted to do was rank the essential services, and that would help all the departments identify what that looked like for them exactly in stage 3. So we had every department, we shared out an Excel spreadsheet that had everybody rank what their essential services were. So we had them, I'm just pulling it up. Okay, great. So we had the department and we used all of our PBB programs. This is where PBB comes in as a jumping off point to say, okay, here's how everybody grouped their programs initially. Let's just start from there. Let's use the information as an advisory for what we had initially ranked in terms of mandatory and public safety. I'm trying to unhide these columns. Here we go. So we included what the mandate was and how high it ranked on safe and secure, which was part of our scoring criteria, to give people a sense or just refresh their memories of what they had initially said in the beginning. And then we went into, okay, let's have people rank again. What is the risk to public safety? What's the economic impact? What would the public health impact be? And we just gave people high, medium, low. This was an exercise meant to be kind of quick and dirty. And then the idea is we would go back and have to negotiate if we needed to. And then what sort of indirect or cascading impacts would there be if we closed one facility? So the cultural sites, we have a home that was owned by a local artist who has since passed away, but if you closed that, that would impact the security, and then it would also mean that the resident artist would need to go home. So there would be that would be the indirect or cascading impact. So then we wanted to ask people about potential to reduce staff or provide a lower level of service versus just turning it off or closing it all the way. Can this be performed remotely? And if it can't be, we wanted to gather a little bit of info about it so that we could then provide this list to the IT department and say, okay, we can provide this remotely, but we need a little bit of tech assistance. So then finally, we were asking people to tier, and we just had them tier into 3: must do, should do, can be delayed. And then what are the risks of continuing this service, and then any type of note at the end. So the idea is that after this, we went in and we kind of looked at all of the must-dos. You can see there was a lot of must-dos initially. And then we had to kind of sure this is a must do, and maybe kindly help them adjust it, and then go into the should do's, and then the ones that can be delayed will need to be revisited at a certain point down the road. So the essential services didn't feel as kind of easy to get to as the action plans. But what we're seeing now is that as we're really truly shutting these down and sending people home and giving people the technology that they need, we've been able to kind of adjust or walk through specific things based on the essential services. So for example, field services. Are we considering field services to be essential at this point? No, at this point we still have people out in the community giving parking tickets, checking up on buildings, permitting, and sort of construction in investigations, but then at a certain point we will pull back our field people and have to figure out what that looks like. And the cascading impacts of that are pretty significant relating to the economy, and so that one would be an example of having an indirect or cascading impact. So that's basically all I have. And I wanted to open it up for questions and hear let me know if that didn't make sense. I'm happy to clarify anything and curious what other people are thinking.
Chloe, I'll ask for anybody who has questions, please go ahead and use the raise hand in the participants window or type a note in chat, and that's how we can start to field some of the questions while you're typing your questions in. I had one quick question right off the bat. Chloe, did you use, from your program data, I know that you have staffing tied to programs as you've performed costing in the past, so that you could see like what programs does Chloe Ross participate in. Did that come in handy at all in terms of finding out like who are the actual people working on one program or another as you were going through that analysis?
Yeah, good question. I think because we were trying to go through this pretty quickly, and we early on in the process decided, to a certain extent, less information might be better at this point to have people go through and be able to rank. We didn't use the staffing data. I think we relied more, I guess the other piece of it is that we haven't done our 2019 program costing yet. So we're working off of like that 2018 data. So maybe for us, it wouldn't have been as relevant anyway. I'd be curious about how other people would think of using it. To us, we went back and forth on the amount of PBB scoring info that we wanted to include, because we didn't want people to get mired in the details of, well, this was how the group scored it. Well, we should go with what the group said. No, let's just keep that in mind about the mandate as we move forward in these things.
Thanks a lot. That makes total sense. I know Patrick Furman from Denver had a question, just how long Boise's been doing PBB. Thank you, Steve. Fielded that question. Another one is, Chloe's other questions come in. Did you identify new services at all that, for example, the type of planning that you are working on right now for the continuity of operations plan? Did you identify some new things that weren't necessarily on your list that now, people are obviously resourcing?
We didn't identify anything that was an essential service or that was a must do, that was a new program. And truthfully, we're still going through like our must do's, and then the should do's were the second. Those were the most important to us. So no, we didn't really come across anything new, but we did allow room for that in terms of how people were thinking about it. and they filling it out. So we definitely said, hey, if this doesn't feel relevant, or if it feels like things have changed for you, feel free to add an additional program in, or make changes. And it, I think people's heads were more in like, okay, how are we going to be moving people around, and less in how are we adding new programs. The other thing though, what we did do was consolidate some of the programs, like in parks, for example, they had broken theirs up into adult golf lessons or youth golf lessons. And what we did was just put all of those golf lessons together, all of the pools together, all of the art programming together to make things a little bit easier. I think parks has been is one of our biggest challenges. Probably other cities are seeing the same thing, just purely in the number of external facing programming and facilities that they operate. And so, it's easier, I think, to say, okay, we can shut the zoo down to the public, but we still always have to be feeding the animals no matter what. But then the question also is, well, how much maintenance should we be doing on our sports fields now, in anticipation of, of getting through this and then wanting to open up and have your expected level of service be up and ready to go when it's time for people to get out and about again.
It makes tons of sense what you're saying. I'm still monitoring participants and chat lists for questions coming in. Chloe, another thought, as you were just talking about basically level of service changes, and you got to feed the animals that still have to take place, even though the zoo might not be open, versus parks maintenance in the parks. Are you at all thinking of how to communicate basically programs that aren't getting done as staff shifts their time and they're allocating their efforts towards the things that are getting done in a different way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's, I think, that's why we wanted to have the phases be really clear to help in the communication. So then everyone kind of has some cover to say, okay, here's where the city's at in closing all of these facilities, and here's, kind of why we're doing it at this stage. And then there's consistency across, and it doesn't feel as arbitrary as like, okay, well, we decided to close this facility, but this one, maybe we want to keep open. And the other thing is we had a vulnerable populations lens to it too. So how are we working with people who are in shelters or homeless, people experiencing homelessness? And then the other piece of it, like we have a senior center, we probably shouldn't be operating the senior center, but those people still need meals, food on a regular basis. So like, how should we redirect the resources to provide more like takeout services or other service delivery methods?
That's amazing. I know Denver has a similar BPA a tag, kind of like vulnerable communities, and theirs is around equity, but they would be able to find those programs faster. That vulnerable tag sounds like that was definitely handy. Your other categories of scoring also made a lot of sense, and I like that you made it simple. Eric Keck is posting in the Zoom group chat about a min-specs exercise, like what is the bare minimum of things we need to know to make a staffing decision. And you got to some new things that in my mind translate towards very relevant scoring categories for the purpose of the exercise you were inventing. Did you have any trouble coming up with some of those categories, or can you talk through like how did you settle on those?
Yeah, we just sort of got through Good question. I mean, it was a group of 3 of us, and we pulled out the PBB data and we decided, okay, here's the most relevant. And we really started from that like legal mandate lens of what do we absolutely have to do? And then wanting to account for some other basic things. We added the public safety, obviously, and the economic impact and the public impact, health impact. But then I think it was kind of like based on what people rated it as a tier 1 or 2, then we needed to quickly pivot to what it would look like to actually change the level of service. We had, I guess you can say we had a sort of small team, just like we sat down and did it in a couple of hours, and that was that. We didn't really give, contrary to what we usually try to do, we didn't really give people that much of an option to say, hey, yes or no. We sort of launched it and said, take it offline with us if you feel like this is off base. And no one really did. I think everybody was kind of like, okay, we'll just go in and do it and get through this,
Totally. Well, please, if anybody else continues to have questions for Chloe, raise your hand or enter in the chat. Chloe, we'll still monitor that. So if questions come up to you, we will announce them. But I wanted to give you the floor to actually ask. We have Columbia, South Carolina. We have KCMO, Denver, Rio Rancho, St. Albert, Alberta. There are tons of organizations, South Jordan, Utah, on the line. Without naming everybody, did you have some questions that you wanted to take advantage of the group to pose or get some response to?
Yeah, I do actually. I'm wondering, I have a couple questions. The first question is that we are now in the phase of trying to put together, so the police and fire have pretty standard protocols for incident management response, and they've set up their structure and their, kind of incident management team, and they're like ready to go. I think this is a little bit of a weird one because it's not like we have a fire, like literally or figuratively, to put out, in this one specific spot, or a flood, to address. This is more like it's an incident, but it's not like a very, targeted incident, I guess. It's sort of more widespread. So what we're trying to do is figure out how to interact with the incident management team, which is outwardly, community facing, while what the major incident for us right now is really like closing the city of Boise down, or putting protections in place. So I'm wondering if other cities are having that type of challenge, and kind of how they've managed that or are managing it right now. Does anyone have an incident management team that's been propped up? Maybe not.
It looks like Missy from Columbia, South Carolina. Missy, if you want to go ahead and comment, we can take you off.
Okay.
An entire
yeah, I'm curious, what is the entire management team kind of working on? Okay.
Missy, if you can unmute yourself, please feel free to talk.
Well, so I also have another question. Oh.
Does that help?
Yes, there we go.
There we go. So we've been working on this for a couple of weeks now.
What city are you from, Missy?
I'm sorry, this is Missy Kaufman. I'm with the City of Columbia in South Carolina.
Okay, cool.
And I was very excited to see this. As Jackie and Chris know, we are still deep into our PBB implementation and efforts. So where we are with our team, our management team, is we're looking both an internal and external approach in terms of both just the logistics and supplies that our staffing may need, and then also too working on how we can identify working remote. A lot of what you've sent here, we've had the same challenge. There's not an immediate answer. It's just like asking the question, what are basic services? You're going to get a different answer from everyone.
Yeah.
A different answer in terms of who's essential. Our city manager is pretty adamant about us not working in the office and being remote and trying to be remote. However, providing services to the direct public is one thing, and then also just being able to work internally within our work teams is also a challenge. Not to mention having the resources of who has a laptop, who has the actual resources needed to work remote, whether they have a laptop or access to the software and applications or even hard files that they may need. So we have a staffing team working on some of those things along with our IT and also then communication. Then we also have an external look in terms of assistance to provide and work for with our businesses that are being impacted. So we have a small business team assistance, some of those type of structures as well. So we have a cross-functional teams working as well as that are both internal looking and internal. And one of the big areas too is how we have our continuity of businesses with our public, but also so our council can continue to meet via virtual council meetings. We've already had 2 virtual council meetings, and that were regular scheduled meetings. And tomorrow we have a special called council meeting that will all be held virtually, utilizing Zoom and some other features.
How about your boards and commissions? Are you guys looking at all virtual too, or are you trying to figure out, are there some that could be stopped or delayed?
A combination of both. Some that need to, because if looking at this as a longer, more than a 2-week period, some of these boards and commissions, continue to meet virtually. So we do have some, planning like planning commission, board of zoning appeals, those things that the business needs to continue, and we'll probably model something of what we're doing with our city council. Some of the other special committees that are special, just for special purposes, may or may not need to meet, but if we look at this as a longer term period, we'll need to figure out ways that they can continue to meet in a virtual setting. So they're not all spelled out yet, but we're working on that list.
Okay. And then, so as far as your incident management team, they're focused on kind of the business community and the outward citizen facing. And then it sounds like you've got your IT department working full bore on figuring out who can work remotely. Along
with our HR team, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But the way that you were able to heat map and we trying to work at things in phases is a great example and very helpful.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, it felt like a really kind of clean way, if overly simplified, at least so that everybody knows what page we're on in any given moment, and that they can be working towards it.
Right, because we're thinking about we're trying to look at this as not just what we need to do for this most immediate issue, but thinking about and knowing that this situation, whether it's a similar situation or more of a natural disaster type of situation that we're more used to preparing for, there's still several times, although we're not in Boise with a lot of snow, Chris and Jackie know that we can sometimes have our own challenges with weather, be it a hurricane or ice storms that can lock our folks out from physically getting here. So we're looking at this too as what's our longer term gain or approach to taking this to make business continuity.
Yep. Well, and I guess related to that, my other question is about the utilities. And, you know, utilities like water renewal have been identified as being must-do, essential, critical services.
Yep.
But as we move into this next, you know, whatever comes, our public works director is trying to figure out how to, you know, what are other cities doing in terms of creating continuity of operations in those facilities where you must have a person there, and how do you keep people separated enough, or do you bring in teams of people that you know, I guess a team of someone to clean. I don't know. I'm curious what other cities are doing, or if there are any resources that anyone could connect me with related to that.
Well, I will say we are also suspending our water and sewer turnoff, our disconnections.
Okay.
Late payment for now.
Yep. We just announced that as well, that everybody keeps getting water and services through this.
Mm-hmm.
How about anyone else? Is anyone else having, you know, particular challenges or successes in maintenance of utility operations?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is Dawn from St. Albert. I don't have a lot to say, but I know we're trying to keep utilities business as usual. So in Canada, the only utility that we take care of as a municipality is water and wastewater. So our staff are they've decided that they're not going to do the checks. Like normally a resident can call the city and, you know, if they're having issues, the city can come out and put the camera down, pipe, and,
right.
So we're referring that to private companies now, like plumbers. And if our team does have to go into somebody's house for a reason, then, you know, they're wearing full but basically we're trying to encourage most of that private. And then our province has worked with the energy and electricity, like so heat and electricity providers to provide financial assistance. And again, it's the same kind of programs where nobody will be out of power or heat. With, you know, they're not going to get cut off over the next little while, and there'll be some payment deferral programs and stuff like that that's coming, but that's taken care of at the provincial level here.
Okay. Oh, okay. That's good to know. Thank you. Okay, well, if anybody comes across, you know, an innovative way or something that is out of the ordinary or a success, I'd definitely be curious in remaining in contact, even if it's a sidebar through ResourceX to connect. I would bring the public works director in as well to have a more probably detailed or sophisticated conversation about it. But I wanted to just fly that flag as we keep moving through. And those were kind of my two main questions right now. I am curious though, as other people are identifying their essential services, if you have any words of wisdom or techniques that have worked.
A couple of thoughts. When Liz is posting a link to an open discussion forum, Chloe, that we use on Slack, and that would be a great place to continue to connect people to the ResourceX community for sure, to post questions and see what can come up. One other question that came up was from Jackie English. There's a question back for you, Chloe. What if any data did you wish you had before entering into the exercise? Okay, that's a very interesting question.
Good question. What do I wish we had? You know, the finance department is having a hard time. I think maybe they had the hardest time determining what was essential versus their should do's, because they're responsible for the clerk's office. So like businesses licensing, childcare licensing, the parking, things that I think could easily be should do's versus essential services. Like, how do you define? And then being able to quickly pull, like, how much revenue are these services bringing into the city on a monthly basis? So, you know, the revenue portion we didn't really go into from a PBB perspective initially because of the challenges around this, but I think this is a great case for why having the revenue at the service level is easily accessible is really important. We have the information, but you know, you're having to kind of pull it or generate it quickly as opposed to being readily accessible. That's a good question. Thanks,
and that's an amazing point. Sorry, I was talking over somebody. I'm sorry, I don't know who I spoke over, but please feel free to re-engage. Chloe, I thought that was a really amazing point that was not on my radar screen either, was as you're designating essential versus non-essential, starting to realize, I mean, you're doing it for all the right reasons, but then there are consequences as you then start to look at the financial ramifications. That was a really great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And similar question moving forward, Steve was asking earlier, as we were trying to brainstorm some other questions, what resources, you mentioned utilities, what data are you looking for moving forward? What other ways can we help, or can the community help? Do you have that in mind, or are you just kind of feeling your way through?
Yeah, well, I think initially it was like, how is everyone else using their PBB programs? It felt like a really easy, great place to start. And then I thought, if this is so easy, there must be some other use cases or other examples that people are using. And then I think staying in contact, like even across departments as they were filling out their action plans, we got some really good ideas about how specific groups or work teams could quarantine themselves, or how you could do some like kind of social distancing between those people who must be at City Hall and must be carrying out these essential services. So I think, and then other departments were like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, we could totally do that. So I think we're just trying to make sure that we're accounting for everything in this time of unknowns. So I love the Slack, and I'll definitely be checking up on that and being a part of it. And I'm happy to share out these documents. I think I shared them with you yesterday, Chris, to email out. But I'm just curious what other people are thinking and how everyone else is reacting.
In the remaining 13, 15 or so minutes, does anybody want to reply to Chloe from that standpoint? Just kind of share what your approach is looking like in general, or any other questions on your mind?
or even as this information gets shared out and anyone has any type of like, hey, wait, how did you do this, or clarifying what we did or why we did it, I'm happy to be a resource too, and have an offline conversation about the staging or the essential service mapping.
That's great. Chloe, maybe last question from my end. I was thanks a lot, Don from St. Albert. Take care. I was particularly interested, we do a costing exercise, staff allocate their time. And like you mentioned, you didn't necessarily use that portion of your data because that costing exercise was from the 2019 information. And I was just kind of curious, thinking through, do you see an application for a more spot in time? Is that the right word? Like, hey, here's my department, here's my staffing, here's what it's looking like this week. Here are the programs, and roughly here are the ones I'm working on a percentage basis, and here are the ones that we're definitely not working on. Just to be able to see where the level of effort is growing or possibly in need at a programmatic level.
Yeah, you're bringing up a good point that I hadn't quite thought about. But what we have just done and we're launching today is just like a basic SharePoint site that all departments will go in and provide department updates on a daily basis by 3 o'clock. So then the incident management team leader can provide like a situation report to the mayor and council. And one of the questions that we're asking in that is like, give us an update, any changes in staffing or service delivery. What challenges are you having? And then what kinds of needs do you have or challenges are you experiencing related to operational issues, communications, or anything else? So what we're doing is checking in with departments every single day to figure out what they need, and then we'll have to start responding. And I would have to think a little bit about how we could group the staff allocations in. Maybe what we do is we look at what those essential services are and the ones that keep going, and then we look at the people and we start doing some resource allocation based on that. I don't know what the need for it is yet. I think that would be figuring out what the need is.
Sure. Just talking it through, I think your idea of daily reports is pretty awesome. And that thought of like, wow, are certain programs really in need of resources? Are other programs simply, there's no more time left for people to provide them, even if they are on the essential list? That might be just in general interesting to see if our department allocated all of their time to a couple of the highly essential, very urgently needed programs, to communicate that there's no time being allocated to some of the other programs. Might be very fascinating to see what's essential or what's just not able to get done.
Well, that's true. And I guess the other piece of it is, of those non-essential services, you're going to have people who inherently can't do their job at home. And so how many of those people, but yeah, we're still going to pay them. And so of those people who are available, is there a way that we can redeploy them towards the more essential services?
Amen. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So that's the other piece. We're trying to put a tracking list together of kind of like available resources that would also maybe even be like vehicles or other like supplies and things. I'm trying to think how we could, apply that to PBB, or how PBB could help us in that way.
Maybe it's something we can continue the conversation on, but I really like where you're going. It has nothing to do with the costs of programs in the budget at all. It has everything to do with, here are your resources, human resources and otherwise, like you said. Here's where we're deploying them as we know it for a big generalization percentage of time. And here are the staff members who either aren't working, they're just not being utilized, and they become available resources to try to redeploy the same like general information of where people are being attached seems like it could be relevant there, but it could use some thinking through.
Yeah, I think I would just have to think a little bit more. And I think as we move through this for a couple days, we'll have a better sense of what we need. And, you know, right now we're kind of just like, Boise at least is just getting ready. We're trying to figure out what the right moves are to make at the right times.
Sure. Gotcha. Makes total sense. Well, Chloe, thank you so much. Just one more chance for anybody else. If you haven't had a chance to ask Chloe a question or write something in the chat, please feel free to unmute yourself. And if not, we've got the Slack line open. Liz has posted for additional follow-up questions, which can definitely be easier sometimes than on a Zoom, and especially for information sharing. We'll stay in touch with what we have planned for presentations and events coming up next week, and certainly look on the website. But Chloe, just thanks a ton. Thanks so much for sharing what you've worked on. It's totally innovative, and just really appreciate you sharing it with the entire community. It's great work.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me and for putting this together. And I'm also just like curious to keep remaining in contact as this evolves, and making sure that we're using the good ideas that they're coming up and being generated.
Awesome. All right, I think we'll probably bring this to a close, but thanks everybody. Definitely stay healthy and safe, and take care of your communities, and we'll stay in touch with you all. Take care, you guys.
Thanks so much. Stay well.